The Carter mansion stood in the quiet stretch of East Hampton, where the ocean breeze carried whispers of salt and wealth. The tall glass windows reflected the pale moonlight, but inside the rooms remained restless. For weeks, Olivia and Noah, the 3-year-old twins of Richard and Emily Carter, had not slept longer than a few scattered minutes. Every night the air filled with their sobs until exhaustion silenced them, only for the crying to return moments later. No luxury mattress, no doctor's prescription, no high-priced specialist had been able to bring them peace. Emily Carter walked the halls at dawn, her silk robe clinging to her as though it weighed more than the burdens of her sleepless nights. She pressed her palm against her forehead, feeling the ache of days without rest. Richard stood in his office most evenings, phone glued to his ear, frustration twisting his voice as he barked orders about stocks, projects, or new medical consultations. Yet none of it mattered when the twins' screams echoed through the house. The wealth that had built their empire felt powerless against the simplest human need: sleep. This family, admired and envied by many, was crumbling within walls worth tens of millions. Emily's voice cracked when she whispered to her husband late one night, "Money doesn't mean anything if they don't stop crying." "Richard, they're only babies." He held her hand for a fleeting second, his gaze avoiding hers. He had built an empire on solutions and control, but here, in his own home, he was helpless. And so, the stage was set for the moment when a woman, far from their world, would step into it with nothing but a voice and a song born out of pain. That song, created behind iron bars, would travel from the shadows of prison cells to the gilded chambers of a billionaire's mansion. It would be the thread weaving despair into hope, chaos into calm. But none of them knew this yet. They only felt the growing silence between them, the kind of silence that made even the ticking of a clock sound unbearable. Before I continue, if you want to hear more stories of transformation, redemption, and the power of human connection, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Every story we tell carries a lesson that might change the way you see the world. Back in the Carter's house, the staff whispered in low tones, fearing the sharp ears of their employers. The nannies had rotated in and out, some quitting, others dismissed for failing to quiet the twins. One nurse, exhausted, muttered under her breath as she packed her bag, "No amount of money can buy peace for those kids." Her words floated in the air, lingering like smoke. Emily began to avoid mirrors. Her once radiant face now carried shadows under her eyes, and her smile, once her social armor, had disappeared. At night, she sat beside the twins' cribs, rocking back and forth even when they didn't respond. Sometimes she hummed a tune she barely remembered from her own childhood, but her voice trembled too much to steady their cries. Richard, on the other hand, retreated deeper into his fortress of denial. He locked himself in his office reading medical journals, sending donations to research labs, convincing himself that the right solution could be bought. But deep down, he knew this problem was beyond his reach. He refused to name it, but the fear was there, that he, with all his power, could not protect his children from something as natural and necessary as sleep. And so, night after night, the Carter mansion remained wide awake, its silence broken only by the cries of Olivia and Noah. Desperation thickened the air, pressing against everyone who entered. They did not yet know that salvation would come from a voice long silenced by circumstance, a lullaby written not for children, but for survival. Soon, fate would carry that voice from shadows to light. Maya Johnson had never known a life of ease. Born in the west side of Detroit, she grew up in a neighborhood where broken streetlights outnumbered working ones, and laughter often competed with the distant echo of sirens. Her mother, Lorraine, worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and waiting tables at night, just to keep the rent paid and food on the table. Maya remembered evenings when the smell of fried chicken and cornbread filled their small apartment, but her mother's chair at the table remained empty, her apron still tied around her waist as she rushed back out the door. Despite the hardships, music had always been Maya's refuge. She sang in church every Sunday, her voice carrying hope that felt larger than the peeling paint of the wooden pews. "You've got a gift, baby," the choir director told her once, placing a hand on her shoulder. Maya would smile shyly, clutching the worn hymnal as though the words inside belonged to her. She scribbled lyrics in old-school notebooks, verses about dreams and freedom. But life outside church walls was far less forgiving. By the time she reached high school, Maya was pulled into a circle of friends who lived fast and reckless. One mistake blurred into another: skipping classes, stealing small things from convenience stores, borrowing money from people who expected it back with interest. She wasn't hardened or cruel, just lost, desperate to fit into a world that promised quick escapes from the weight she carried. It was a credit card scheme that finally caught her. She had agreed to help a friend make quick cash, not realizing the severity of what she was walking into. The charges stacked high, and when the plan fell apart, Maya found herself standing in front of a judge. At 24, she was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud. She remembered the slam of the gavel, her mother's muffled sobs in the back of the courtroom, and the metallic chill of the handcuffs around her wrists. Prison was nothing like the world she had known. The days bled into each other, grey walls pressing in, the sound of metal doors clanging shut marking time more than any calendar. Some women shouted to keep their sanity. Others grew silent, retreating into themselves. Maya chose a different path. At night, when the cell block quieted and the fluorescent lights buzzed above her, she began to hum. The melody came from nowhere, soft and trembling at first, but it steadied with each passing night. Words soon followed, lines about loneliness, about the ache of wanting to be held, about finding light when surrounded by shadows. It became her lullaby, a song she sang not for children, but for herself. She whispered it like a prayer when sleep refused to come, when the weight of guilt pressed on her chest. Her cellmate, a woman named Carmen, once turned to her with tears in her eyes. "Girl, that song of yours, it makes me forget where I am for a minute." Maya hadn't realized its power until then. The lullaby spread beyond her cell, carried in whispers down the hall, hummed by women who found comfort in its notes. But even as the song brought solace, Maya never forgot the price of her mistakes. She missed birthdays, funerals, even her mother's proudest moments. Letters from home grew fewer, each one reminding her of the distance her choices had created. Still, she clung to the lullaby. It was the only thing in prison that was truly hers, a piece of her soul untouched by bars or judgment. When her release finally came, Maya stepped out into the cold air of freedom with nothing more than a bag of worn clothes and the memory of her song. Detroit hadn't changed much, the cracked sidewalks, the graffiti, the corner stores, but she had. She carried her lullaby inside her like a secret, unsure if the world outside would ever need to hear it. She didn't yet know that the song born in despair would one day echo in a house far beyond anything she had imagined. The Carter's life was measured in zeros and square footage. Richard Carter had built his fortune through a software empire that transformed how corporations handled security systems. His name carried weight on Wall Street, whispered in boardrooms, stamped on foundations. He liked control, precision, results, and his home reflected it. 40,000 square feet of polished marble floors, sprawling lawns, and a private dock that stretched into the Atlantic. Yet inside this fortress of glass and stone, peace had gone missing. Emily Carter was his opposite in almost every way. Where Richard's words were sharp and calculated, hers were tender, filled with warmth that had once drawn people to her at social events. She had been a journalist before marriage, known for asking the kinds of questions that dug beneath polished surfaces. But lately her strength was buried under exhaustion. The twins' insomnia had hollowed her eyes and carved new lines into her face. She lived in silk robes and quiet desperation, pacing nursery floors at hours when even the ocean outside seemed asleep. Olivia and Noah were 3, but their small frames sagged with fatigue. They cried until their throats rasped, their cheeks hot from tears. Pediatricians had been called in from the best hospitals in New York. Sleep therapists designed routines with lavender oils, weighted blankets, and specialized lighting systems. A Harvard-trained neurologist spent 3 days observing them, leaving with nothing but a frustrated shrug. "They should be sleeping," he had said. "Medically, there's no reason they can't." But something deeper is unsettled here. The staff had tried everything, Nannies read stories in gentle voices until their throats ached. Nurses sang lullabies, but the twins turned restless after a few minutes. Even Emily, desperate, had tried singing herself, recalling fragments of her mother's old tunes. But her voice cracked under pressure, her heart breaking when the children screamed louder instead of calming down. Richard hated weakness, and each sleepless night reminded him of his inability to solve this problem. He worked from his office late into the night, glass walls surrounding him as he barked orders into phones. "I don't care what it costs," he once snapped at his assistant. "If there's a solution, I want it here by morning." But there never was. Money could purchase experts, but it couldn't buy silence, nor the gentle drift of a child into sleep. The mansion staff whispered about the crisis like it was a secret disease. In the polished kitchen over silver trays and steaming pots, they murmured about the children's screams echoing through marble halls. "They say the twins haven't slept in weeks," one housekeeper whispered. Another shook her head. "All this money and they can't even rest. God must be laughing at them." Their words carried the bitterness of people who lived in someone else's kingdom, always serving but never belonging. Emily overheard once, and the sting pierced deeper than she expected. She retreated upstairs, clutching Noah in her arms, whispering promises she couldn't keep. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy won't leave you." Her words trembled, powerless against his cries. Olivia, in her crib, pounded her tiny fists against the mattress, wide-eyed and desperate. The Carters' world had become a cycle of frustration and despair. Days blurred into nights, the ticking of antique clocks mocking their helplessness. Doctors came and left, consultants billed astronomical fees, but the results were the same. Emily's strength was unraveling thread by thread. Richard's patience was gone, replaced by silent rage he hid behind spreadsheets and stock updates. The mansion still gleamed in the sunlight, hosting charity dinners and weekend guests who never glimpsed the truth behind closed doors. To the outside world, the Carters were untouchable, but inside, their empire was weakening at its foundation. For in a house filled with staff and wealth beyond imagination, the two people who mattered most, Olivia and Noah, could not find rest. And without rest, everything else was starting to crack. When Maya walked out of prison, she thought freedom would taste sweet. Instead, it felt uncertain, like a road without signs. The first weeks were the hardest. Her old neighborhood seemed smaller, filled with faces that remembered her mistakes. Each job application she filled out carried the same weight of hope, only to be crushed by the same rejection. "We'll be in touch," they said, their polite smiles hiding the truth. Her record spoke louder than her voice. She tried to stay strong, clutching her mother's encouragement like a lifeline. Lorraine had aged while Maya was gone, her hair thinner, her eyes tired but determined. "You're not the same girl who went in," she told her daughter one evening over a simple meal of beans and rice. "You've got something new in you. Don't let the world make you forget it." Maya nodded, but inside she felt the old doubt creeping in. What kind of future could she build when every door seemed locked? Church was the one place where she still felt seen. The wooden pews creaked beneath her, the smell of wax and old hymnals lingering in the air. People whispered about her return, some kind, others suspicious, but a few embraced her. Pastor Williams offered quiet counsel, reminding her that redemption was a path walked slowly. It was a woman from the choir, Mrs. Green, who first mentioned the agency. "They place people in homes," she said, adjusting her glasses. "It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. Better than waiting for a chance that may never come." Maya hesitated. Domestic work wasn't what she imagined for herself, yet pride didn't pay bills. She swallowed her discomfort and visited the agency the next day. The office was small, tucked between a laundromat and a pharmacy in downtown Detroit. Behind the counter sat a woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard who looked Maya up and down before asking, "Any experience?" Maya explained she'd helped care for her cousins, that she knew how to cook, clean, and manage children. But when the question about her background came, she froze. Honesty had cost her opportunities before, but lying carried risks she couldn't afford. "I served time," she admitted softly, "for fraud. But I've changed. I just need a chance." The woman studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Not many families will take this risk, but there's a placement I can't keep filled. High pay, long hours, they're desperate. She scribbled an address on a form. Hampton's Billionaire family. You'll be tested the moment you walk in. Do you want it? Maya stared at the paper, her heart racing. The Hamptons felt like another world entirely, a place of polished gates and untouchable lives. What could she possibly offer them? Still, something deep inside her whispered that she had nothing to lose. I'll take it, she said, surprising even herself. The journey there was surreal. She boarded a train from Detroit to New York, clutching her bag of neatly folded clothes and the notebook where she had written her songs. As the landscape changed from rusted factories to gleaming skylines, she wondered what awaited her. Would they see her only as an ex-convict, or could she carve a space for herself in their carefully curated world? By the time she reached the gates of the Carter mansion, she was trembling. The iron fences rose high above her, the drive lined with manicured hedges that seemed to guard the secrets of those inside. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to straighten her back. This is just another door, she whispered, echoing her mother's advice. You've walked through harder ones before. She rang the bell, and when the gates opened, a new chapter began, one she could never have imagined, where her voice would matter more than her past. The Carter mansion felt colder than Maya expected. Polished floors stretched endlessly, the walls decorated with artwork she couldn't name, each piece glowing under soft spotlights. Staff members moved briskly, their uniforms pressed and voices low, eyes darting toward her like she was an intruder rather than a newcomer. She adjusted the strap of her modest bag, wishing she had worn something sharper, though she knew no outfit could erase the mark of her past. Mrs. Carter greeted her first. Emily looked tired, her silk blouse wrinkled, her hair pulled back loosely. There was kindness in her eyes, though exhaustion dulled it. "You're Maya, right?" she asked, her voice thin. Maya nodded quickly, answering, "Yes, ma'am. I'm here from the agency." Emily gave a faint smile. "We'll see how it goes. The children, they're difficult right now. More than difficult, actually." Noah's wails filled the hallway before she finished speaking. Emily closed her eyes for a second, whispering, "There it is again." She led Maya to the nursery, where Olivia sat clutching the bars of her crib, her little face red from crying. Noah was on the floor, kicking against a plush carpet, his cheeks wet with tears. Two nannies hovered nearby, whispering in frustration. One turned and muttered, "It's useless." Nothing works. Emily bent to pick up Noah, but he arched away, shrieking louder. Olivia's sobs rose in response, the sound sharp enough to pierce through Maya's chest. Something inside her stirred, a memory of sleepless nights in a cell, humming to herself just to make it through. Without thinking, she stepped closer. "May I?" she asked softly. Emily hesitated, then nodded, too weary to protest. Maya knelt, her heart pounding as Noah flailed before her. She didn't try to grab him. Instead, she closed her eyes and began to hum. The melody slipped out of her quietly at first, the same one she had sung to herself in the darkest hours. The notes were low, steady, carrying the weight of comfort born out of pain. At first, nothing changed. Noah's cries stuttered, then swelled again. But as Maya's humming deepened into words, his fists loosened. Olivia gripped the bars of her crib tighter, watching with wide, wet eyes. Maya's voice softened the edges of the room, wrapping itself around the children like a blanket. Slowly, Noah's sobs quieted to hiccups. His breathing steadied, his head tilting toward her voice. Olivia let out one last whimper before lying down, her little hands unclenching as she curled onto the mattress. The room stilled. The silence was so sudden it startled the nannies. One whispered, "Lord," they finally stopped. Emily's mouth hung open, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She whispered, as if afraid to break the spell, What did you just do?" Maya swallowed, unsure whether to admit the truth. "It's just a lullaby I wrote," she said quietly, her eyes still on the children. Emily stepped closer, her hand trembling as she touched Olivia's hair. The little girl was asleep, truly asleep for the first time in weeks. "They've never—" Emily's voice cracked. "No one has been able to calm them like this." The nannies exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of awe and irritation. One muttered under her breath, "Beginner's luck." But even she couldn't deny what her eyes saw. Both children breathing deeply, their faces peaceful at last. Emily turned to Maya, her voice filled with something close to pleading. "Stay with them a little longer. Please." Maya nodded, though her chest was tight. For the first time since leaving prison, she felt her presence mattered, not because of her mistakes, but because of something she had carried out of that place. The lullaby, born in darkness, had found a purpose in this shining, desperate house. The next morning the mansion buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in weeks. For the first time, the twins had slept through the night. Their laughter, faint and uncertain, drifted through the halls as they toddled after one another. Emily watched them with disbelief, her hand pressed against her lips, afraid it might all vanish as quickly as it appeared. But not everyone shared her joy. At breakfast, the staff whispered in corners, their voices sharp with envy. One of the older maids muttered, "She sings one song and suddenly she's a miracle worker." Another snorted, "I've been here 5 years, and Mrs. Carter never looked at me the way she looked at her last night." Their words carried a sting, but Maya pretended not to hear as she polished the silverware laid out before her. Richard, however, was less subtle. He studied Maya with suspicion as he sipped his coffee, his sharp suit immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, even on a Saturday morning. "Emily," he said, not taking his eyes off Maya, "you can't actually believe one song fixed our children." Emily's reply was immediate. "I don't just believe it, Richard. I saw it. I was there." She turned to him, her voice firmer than usual. "They haven't slept in weeks, and then she sang and they rested. You can't call that coincidence." Richard set his cup down with a soft clink. Children respond to change, new faces, new routines. It doesn't mean she's the answer. His gaze shifted back to Maya, cool and unyielding. "I don't like relying on chance, and I certainly don't like mysteries in my own home." Maya lowered her eyes, heat rushing to her cheeks. She hadn't asked for attention, only done what felt natural. Yet the weight of Richard's skepticism pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than any prison bar. Later that day, Emily found Maya folding the children's laundry in the nursery. She sat down beside her, her voice softer. "Don't mind Richard. He doesn't trust easily. He thinks the world runs on contracts and calculations, but I—" She paused, glancing at Olivia curled up asleep in the crib. "I think what you did was real, and I need you here, for them and maybe for me too." Maya hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble." "If he wants me gone, no." Emily's voice sharpened, surprising even herself. "You're staying, if you're willing, of course." Maya looked at her hands, at the tiny socks she held between her fingers. "I'll stay. I just don't want to make things harder." Outside the nursery, the staff's resentment simmered. One nanny, her pride wounded, cornered Maya in the hallway. "Don't think this makes you special," she hissed. "Families like this chew people up and spit them out. You won't last." Maya met her eyes, the old instinct to shrink back tugging at her. But then she remembered the quiet peace on the twins' faces the night before, the way Olivia's small hand had relaxed against the crib bars. That memory steadied her voice. "I'm not here to compete. I'm just here to help," the nanny scoffed, turning on her heel. Yet even as she walked away, doubt flickered in her eyes. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple, Maya sat by the twins' cribs once more. She sang softly, her voice weaving through the air. Emily lingered by the door, listening, her heart swelling with fragile hope. Richard passed by but didn't enter, his silhouette stiff against the golden light. He paused for only a moment before walking away, his jaw clenched, his doubts unshaken. In that house of marble and glass, trust was still a stranger. But Maya's song had planted something no suspicion could erase, the first fragile seed of change. The days that followed felt different, though tension still lingered in the mansion. For the first time in weeks, Emily wasn't waking up to the twins' cries. Instead, she found them drowsy but smiling, reaching out for Maya when they stirred from their naps. It unsettled some of the staff, but for Emily it was like seeing the first rays of sunlight after a storm. One afternoon, while Maya folded linens in the laundry room, Emily stepped inside quietly. The faint hum of the dryer filled the silence, and the smell of lavender detergent lingered in the air. Emily leaned against the doorway, watching her for a moment before speaking. "You're good with them," she said softly. Maya glanced up, startled. "Thank you, ma'am." "I just sing what I know." Emily smiled faintly. "You can call me Emily. Ma'am makes me feel like my mother." A small laugh escaped Maya's lips, easing some of her nerves. She set the linens down and asked cautiously, "How are you holding up?" Emily exhaled, her shoulders sagging. "Honestly, I've been drowning. These last weeks, I felt like I was losing them, and losing myself too. Every doctor, every treatment, nothing worked, but you—" Her eyes glistened as she trailed off. "You gave them peace, and you gave me hope." Maya shifted uneasily, unused to such open gratitude. "It's just a song. I don't know why it works. I don't want to make promises I can't keep." Emily stepped closer, her voice firmer now. "It's not just the song, it's you. They trust you." "That's something I can't buy." The words lingered in the room, heavier than any compliment Maya had ever received. She looked down at her hands, remembering the countless times she'd been told she wasn't enough, that her past defined her. "I'm not perfect," she whispered. Emily tilted her head, curiosity in her gaze. "What do you mean?" Maya hesitated. Part of her wanted to confess everything, that she wasn't just a maid, that she had walked out of prison only months ago, but fear tightened her throat. If Emily knew the truth, would she still look at her this way? Instead, Maya shook her head. "I've made mistakes. Big ones. I don't want them to matter more than what I'm trying to do now." Emily studied her carefully, but there was no judgment in her eyes. "We all make mistakes. The question is what we do after, and what I see in you. It's someone who's trying to heal." The sound of children's laughter echoed down the hall, interrupting the heaviness of the moment. Emily smiled faintly. "Come. They'll be asking for you soon." Over the following days, Emily and Maya's conversations grew more frequent. They spoke in the quiet hours after the twins had fallen asleep, when the house was still and the ocean breeze rustled against the windows. Emily would ask about Maya's favorite songs, about her childhood, about the moments she felt most herself. Maya answered cautiously, revealing fragments: her church choir days, her mother's long shifts, the way music had always felt like oxygen. "You should sing more often," Emily said one evening. "Not just for the children, for yourself." Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe one day. For now I'll sing for them. It's enough." A subtle bond was forming, delicate but undeniable. For Emily, it was a relief to share her burdens with someone who listened without pretense. For Maya, it was the first time in years she felt like more than a shadow of her past. Still, a part of her remained guarded, a quiet voice reminding her that trust could be dangerous. Yet every time Emily looked at her with gratitude instead of suspicion, that voice grew weaker. Something new was taking root between them, something that neither fully understood but both desperately needed. Richard Carter had built his empire on research, data, and relentless control. He prided himself on seeing through illusions, and to him, Maya was one. Every time he passed by the nursery and saw the twins curled against her voice, unease twisted in his chest. He didn't trust miracles. Miracles were illusions, and illusions led to downfall. One late evening, after the children had fallen asleep under Maya's lullaby, Richard waited for Emily in his study. The room smelled faintly of oak and whiskey, shelves lined with books that were more decoration than interest. He stood by the window, watching the ocean crash against the rocks, his tie loosened, but his posture rigid. Emily entered quietly, her steps light, her silk robe trailing behind her. She looked calmer than she had in weeks, a softness returning to her features. Richard noticed it instantly, and it only fueled his unease. "You look better," he said, his tone edged with accusation. Emily tilted her head. "Because the children are better. They're sleeping, Richard. Don't you see? This is what we've been praying for. He turned sharply, his voice low and firm. What I see is a stranger with a record of mystery suddenly becoming indispensable in our home, and I don't like it. Emily frowned. Mystery? She's a maid, Richard. She sings, the children sleep. That's not mystery, it's a gift. Richard's jaw tightened. I had her checked. Do you want to know what I found? Emily's breath caught. You what? She has a criminal record, fraud, 5 years served, and you've left her alone with our children. His words sliced through the room like a blade. Emily's face paled, but she stood her ground. She told me she's made mistakes. That doesn't erase what I've seen with my own eyes. Those children were drowning in exhaustion, and she gave them back their peace. Richard slammed his hand against the desk, the sound echoing in the stillness. You're blinded by desperation. We can't afford scandal, Emily. What happens if the press finds out we have an ex-convict caring for our children? Do you understand what that could do to us, to the company? Emily's voice rose, stronger than he expected. Do you understand what it's done to me, to us? Watching our children waste away without sleep? I don't care about your company's image, Richard. I care about our family. And right now she is the only one who has helped us. He stared at her, the silence between them heavy with years of unspoken battles. Richard wasn't used to losing arguments, especially not to emotion, but Emily's eyes burned with a conviction he hadn't seen in her in years. Finally he spoke, his voice cold. Fine, she stays, but only on probation. One mistake, one hint of danger, and she's gone. No discussion. Emily crossed her arms, her chin lifting slightly. That's more than fair. But you should know. If she goes, I'll stand with her. The declaration stunned him. For a moment Richard saw not the weary wife he thought he could control, but the journalist who once stood in war zones, demanding truth from generals. The strength in her unsettled him more than Maya ever could. Richard turned back to the window, unwilling to let her see his doubt. The ocean roared beyond the glass, a reminder that even empires could erode under the force of persistence. Behind him, Emily whispered almost to herself, "Sometimes trust is the only thing that can heal." Her words lingered in the air long after she left, wrapping around Richard like a challenge he wasn't ready to face. Maya felt the shift in the air after Richard's discovery. The staff no longer hid their whispers. They lingered in hallways, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. Ex-con, one muttered while polishing silver. Imagine trusting her with children. Another scoffed. I give it a week before she slips. Their words pierced deeper than they intended, reopening wounds Maya thought she had left behind in prison. At night, while the twins slept peacefully under her lullaby, Maya sat by the window of her small room, staring at the ocean. The waves crashed in steady rhythm, reminding her of time. Endless, unstoppable. She whispered to herself, "Why did I think I could belong here?" Yet when she remembered Olivia's small fingers clutching hers, or Noah's head resting against her chest, something inside her pushed back against the doubt. Emily noticed the heaviness in her eyes. One afternoon, while they prepared snacks for the children, Emily said gently, "Don't let their whispers define you. People fear what they don't understand." Maya shook her head, slicing apples with deliberate care. "It's not just whispers, Emily. It's my reality. I did make mistakes. I can't erase them." Emily's gaze softened. "But you're not that person anymore. I see who you are now." So do the children. Maya wanted to believe her, but the shame clung stubbornly. Later that evening, she pulled out the worn notebook she carried everywhere. Between its pages were the original lines of her prison lullaby, scribbled lyrics about fear, darkness, and longing for freedom. She read them under the dim light, realizing the words no longer fit who she was becoming. Slowly, with a pen trembling in her hand, she began to write new verses. Not about despair this time, but about hope, about second chances, about children finding peace in a world that often stole it away. As she wrote, a calmness spread through her. The lullaby was evolving just as she was. Each line she added felt like stitching together the broken pieces of her soul. When she sang the new verses softly to herself, the melody carried light instead of sorrow. But doubt returned the next morning when she walked into the kitchen and found two staff members cutting their conversation short as soon as she entered. Their eyes followed her with suspicion, and one muttered, "She'll slip, they always do." Maya clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to defend herself. Instead, she turned to the twins, who had just woken and toddled into the room. Noah reached up for her hand instinctively, and Olivia tugged at her skirt with a smile. Their trust was wordless but powerful, louder than any rumor. Later, while rocking Noah during his nap, she whispered to herself, "They believe in me. That has to be enough." Yet her chest still tightened with fear. What if Richard found another reason to cast her out? What if one mistake, even small, undid everything she was building? That night, after the twins had drifted into sleep with her new lullaby, Emily lingered by the door. Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "You know, when I look at them now, I don't just see peace. I see the woman who gave it to them. That matters more than any past." Maya looked up, her throat tight. "I don't know if I deserve that kind of faith." Emily stepped closer, her expression steady. "Maybe faith isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about choosing to believe in what's possible." The words lingered in Maya's heart long after Emily left. Alone again, she whispered the new verses of her song, letting them rise into the quiet night. For the first time, she felt a fragile seed of forgiveness blooming within herself. The mornings had become a new rhythm. Olivia and Noah woke earlier than usual, their tiny faces filled with an expression that was rare before. Calm. Maya often found herself standing by their cribs in the quiet dawn, watching as they stretched, blinking their sleepy eyes as if remembering what it felt like to rest. It was a soft miracle, but one that she dared not take for granted. The twins were different now. Not only did they sleep more soundly, but their faces had softened, their once constant cries replaced by smiles. Noah, once a bundle of restless energy, now sat contentedly in Maya's lap, babbling softly in a language only he seemed to understand. Olivia, always the more independent of the two, clung to Maya's side whenever they were in the nursery, her small hand resting on Maya's as if she had known her forever. Emily couldn't hide her joy. She watched Maya with an awe that was both unspoken and unmistakable. One afternoon, as the children played with their toys on the living room floor, Emily joined Maya in the kitchen, her smile brighter than Maya had seen in days. "I never thought I'd see this day," she said softly. "I haven't seen them this happy in so long. I didn't know if I ever would." Maya stirred the soup on the stove, her movements automatic. She kept her eyes down, unsure how to respond to such unguarded praise. "I'm just doing what I know," she said, her voice low. "It's them too. They're getting better. It's not just me." Emily leaned against the counter, her arms folded. "No, Maya. It's you. They trust you in a way they never trusted anyone before. And I do too. You're a part of our family now, whether you see it or not." The words hung in the air, and Maya felt them settle into the space between them. She looked up, meeting Emily's gaze for the first time in a long while, and saw something new there. Acceptance. Not just of her role in the twins' lives, but of who she was becoming in their world. Later that day, Maya sat on the porch with the twins, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The warm light bathed the garden, casting long shadows that stretched across the lawn. Olivia and Noah played together in the grass, their laughter filling the air. For the first time, Maya allowed herself to breathe, to let go of the guilt and doubt that had weighed her down since she stepped into this mansion. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't her old life. And it certainly wasn't easy. But it was real. And in that moment, as Noah pulled her hand and pointed to the sky, she felt something stir in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she had found her place here. The breakthrough didn't happen with a grand gesture or a sudden realization. It came quietly, as things often do when you stop searching for them. Maya had thought she was only meant to sing the lullaby, to ease the children's suffering, but what she hadn't realized was that it was their presence, her presence, that was helping to heal her too. As the night settled in and the twins fell asleep, Maya hummed the song once more, this time not out of necessity but out of gratitude. The room was still, save for the gentle rise and fall of their chests. Maya rested her hand over Noah's small one, a tear slipping down her cheek. It wasn't sadness, it was the beginning of something new. The song had changed her life, and now it was changing theirs too. The quiet victory Maya felt was brief. It wasn't long before whispers began to circulate outside the walls of the mansion, the kind of whispers that never quite stayed where they belonged. The staff at the mansion spoke of the maid who had cured the twins' insomnia, but soon it wasn't just the housekeepers and nannies talking. Word spread to social circles, to the country clubs and charity events that Emily frequented. A few weeks after Maya's arrival, Emily attended a gala hosted by one of Richard's business associates, an event where the elite of New York gathered to exchange pleasantries and maintain facades of perfection. She arrived alone, her thoughts heavier than usual. The children had been sleeping well, and she felt a sense of calm that had eluded her for months. But as she entered the ballroom, she was met with looks that cut through her joy like a knife. "Emily, darling, how are you?" An older woman, someone from Richard's circle, asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I heard you've got quite the story in your household these days. The children finally sleeping, huh?" Emily nodded, but the woman's smile tightened. "Funny how one song can fix everything, isn't it? Seems like quite the miracle worker." There was a glint of skepticism in her voice. Emily's heart sank, but she smiled back, her composure barely holding. "It's more than a song, it's a connection. The children trust her. That's what's made the difference." "Oh, of course," the woman replied, her tone dripping with thinly veiled judgment. "A trust built by a song and a past, I assume? How wonderful that she's earned such trust so quickly." Emily forced herself to remain calm, excusing herself with a polite nod, but her mind was swirling. The words, the insinuations, felt like they were wrapping around her like a noose. Back at the mansion, Maya had become more than just an employee to her. She was a friend, a confidant, a lifeline. And yet, in the eyes of the world, she would always be defined by her past. The tension began to seep into Emily's thoughts in the days that followed. Each time she saw Maya with the twins, she couldn't help but wonder, was she risking too much? The outside world was unforgiving, and though Maya had proven herself, the whispers were loud, their implications undeniable. Could she really protect Maya from the world's judgment? Meanwhile, Maya could feel the shift too. The staff grew more distant, some offering polite smiles that felt more like masks. Others avoided her altogether, their words wrapped in thick layers of suspicion. At first, it didn't bother her. She had learned long ago to ignore the judgments of those who didn't know her, to focus on the things that mattered, like the twins. But soon it became impossible to ignore. One afternoon, as Maya was tidying up the living room, a staff member approached her, her eyes narrowed. "I'm just wondering," the woman began, "how long do you think you'll be here, really? You know, people like you don't last in places like this." Maya stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't respond immediately, unsure of how to handle the thinly veiled hostility. "I'm here to do my job," she finally said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. The woman sniffed, her words cutting deeper. "Yeah, but people like you don't belong here. You're not one of us." The words stung, and Maya turned away, the weight of them lingering long after the woman had left. That evening, as she rocked Noah to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, in the very place she had begun to feel accepted. She wondered how much longer she could keep up the facade of calm, how much longer she could pretend that the whispers didn't hurt. Later that night, as Emily sat beside her, noticing the tension in her shoulders, she asked quietly, "Maya, what's going on?" "You've been distant." Maya didn't want to burden her with the weight of the judgment she faced daily, but she couldn't lie. Not to Emily, not anymore. "I don't belong here, Emily. Not really. Every time I step out of this room, I can feel the eyes on me, the whispers. They think I'm just a mistake waiting to happen." Emily's expression softened, her voice low but firm. "You belong here, Maya. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." But Maya wasn't so sure. The world outside was harsher than Emily's kind words could shield her from, and the tension between her past and the present seemed to stretch farther every day. Maya had always known that there would be a price for her redemption. The whispers, the tension, those were just the beginning. She had walked into the Carter mansion with the hope of a fresh start, but now more than ever, she felt the weight of her past pressing in on her. It wasn't just the staff anymore. It wasn't just the disapproving glances or the veiled comments. It was the very real possibility that the life she had begun to build with the Carters might shatter if she made one wrong move. One afternoon, Richard called Maya into his office. His voice was calm, controlled, his usual demeanor when he needed something done. When she entered, he was seated behind his desk, the soft glow of his desk lamp illuminating his sharp features. "Maya," he began without looking up from his papers, "I need to speak with you about something important." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "Of course, Mr. Carter, what is it?" Richard finally looked up, his gaze cool and calculating. "You know the high society event we're hosting next month. I need a personal assistant to help with some last-minute arrangements. I'd like you to take the position." Maya blinked in surprise. "Me? Why not?" Richard's voice was flat, as if the answer should have been obvious. "You've been here long enough. You know the routines, the people. You've earned it." Maya hesitated. She had no desire to become a fixture in the social events Richard attended. She had never been comfortable in those kinds of settings, and she certainly wasn't sure she wanted to be thrust into the spotlight of the Carter's world. But the opportunity was a challenge she couldn't ignore. It was a chance to prove to herself and to Emily that she belonged. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for the job," Maya said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm here to care for the twins, Mr. Carter." Richard's eyes narrowed. "And that's what you're doing. But you need to understand something. This is more than a job for you. You're here on probation. You've made a difference in the lives of my children, yes, but you've also brought attention. I need to know I can trust you to handle more than just lullabies. This event will be a test. If you want to stay here, you need to prove you can handle the world I move in." Maya's chest tightened. "I see." Richard's lips twitched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good. I'll expect you to be ready. This is your chance to show you can be more than just a maid, Maya." As she left the office, the weight of his words lingered in the air. Maya knew what was at stake. If she failed this test, it wouldn't just be a blow to her standing in the mansion. It would prove every whisper right. It would confirm her worst fear, that her past, the one she had tried so hard to outrun, would always define her. In the days that followed, she threw herself into preparing for the event. She learned the names of the people who would attend, memorized the schedules, and practiced the social graces she had never mastered. Emily noticed the change in Maya, her quieter demeanor, the way her eyes seemed to be constantly searching as if she was bracing for something. "Maya, what's going on?" Emily asked one evening, when she found her sitting in the nursery, the twins already asleep. "You've been so distant lately." Maya's hands trembled as she folded the laundry, her thoughts spinning. "I'm just preparing for the event. I want to do well. I want to show them that I'm more than what they think of me." Emily sat beside her, her voice gentle. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already shown them your worth, Maya." Maya shook her head. "You don't understand. I've been given a chance, but it's fragile. If I fail, everything I've worked for could disappear." Emily placed a hand on Maya's arm. "Maya, no matter what happens, we're with you. You don't have to carry this burden alone." Maya looked at Emily, the sincerity in her eyes giving her a small measure of comfort. But even as Emily's words soothed her, she couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at her. This wasn't just about the event. It was about the life she had begun to build, about whether she could prove to herself that she could truly escape the shadow of her past. As the day of the event drew closer, Maya found herself standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure of what awaited her on the other side. Would she succeed, or would she fall back into the life she had fought so hard to leave behind? The night of the gala arrived, its gleaming lights casting shadows that danced on the marble floors of the Carter mansion. The grand ballroom was decorated with opulent floral arrangements, silver candelabras glowing softly. Staff bustled quietly, setting last-minute touches while guests in designer dresses and suits arrived in a procession of luxury. Maya, now dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, moved through the kitchen taking deep breaths. Her heart raced with the weight of what she had to prove. She had never belonged in these circles. The polished, perfect smiles, the whispered conversations about wealth and status. They were a world she had never known, a world that now felt like it was closing in around her. But tonight, she had been given the chance to be more than just a maid. She was Richard's personal assistant for the evening, a role she had never imagined herself in, a role that came with expectations, not just from Richard, but from everyone watching. Maya stepped into the ballroom, her feet hesitant but steady. Richard greeted her with a clipped nod, his demeanor as controlled as ever. Emily was talking with guests, her smile radiant as always, but Maya could see the tightness in her jaw, the worry in her eyes. She knew Emily was just as nervous as she was. As the night went on, Maya's nerves tightened. She passed trays of hors d'oeuvres to guests, smiled politely when introduced to the high society elite, but each encounter left her feeling more like an outsider. The more she observed the guests, the more she realized how out of place she felt. The polished surfaces of their conversations, the casual mention of charities they funded or the vacations they took, none of it mattered to her. She had lived in a world of survival, not luxury. The turning point came when Maya was asked to escort a guest to Richard's office. The woman, an older socialite with an air of importance, cast a sideways glance at Maya as they walked. "It's quite the privilege, isn't it?" the woman said, her voice dripping with condescension. "To be included in such circles. A miracle worker for the children, I hear." Maya stopped mid-step. The words struck like a slap, harsh and unforgiving. She had been living under the shadow of her past for so long, always carrying the burden of being judged before she could prove herself. "I'm not a miracle worker," Maya said, her voice steady, surprising even herself. "I'm just a person trying to do her job. I have a past, but I don't let it define who I am today." The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. Maya didn't wait for her response, turning on her heel and walking out of the room. As she stepped into the hallway, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had spoken the truth, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a confession. It felt like a declaration. The moment was a revelation. Maya realized that she wasn't just playing a part in someone else's life. She wasn't just trying to survive in the mansion. She was creating something of her own, and she wouldn't let anyone's judgment or expectations derail that. When she returned to the ballroom, she found Emily standing near the entrance, watching the guests mingle with a worried expression. Their eyes met across the room, and Emily gave her a small, knowing smile. Maya walked toward her, her posture straighter, her heart lighter. "You look like you're doing just fine," Emily said quietly. "I think I finally am," Maya replied, her voice filled with quiet strength. The rest of the night passed without incident. Maya handled every task with poise, her movements becoming more confident as the evening wore on. She wasn't just the maid in the background anymore. She was a person in her own right, moving through this world with purpose. By the time the guests left, the mansion was quiet again, the air heavy with the weight of the evening's successes and failures. Richard approached Maya as she was finishing up in the kitchen. His eyes, as always, were unreadable. "You did well tonight," he said, his voice firm but with a trace of approval. "I didn't expect anything less." Maya nodded, but she knew something had shifted. It wasn't just about pleasing him anymore. She had done well because she had proven something to herself. She could navigate this world, not by pretending to be someone else, but by staying true to who she was. The days after the gala unfolded in a quiet stillness, the aftermath of the night's success settling like dust in the corners of the mansion. Maya moved through the halls with a newfound sense of purpose, no longer just an observer of the world around her, but a participant, fully engaged in her role as caretaker, confidant, and now, for lack of a better term, a member of the Carter family. Emily, ever perceptive, noticed the shift in Maya, how her steps had become more confident, her smile more genuine. It wasn't just the twins' peace that Maya had helped restore, it was her own peace too. The weight that had clung to her shoulders for so long, the suffocating fear of rejection and judgment had lifted. The staff, while still keeping their distance, no longer looked at her with open disdain. There was, if not respect, then at least a grudging acceptance. Even Richard, who had once seemed so distant and detached, now addressed her with a certain amount of deference. "You did well," he had said after the gala, his words clipped but sincere. It was in the small everyday moments that Maya found her strength. One afternoon, as she sat on the porch with the twins, watching them play in the yard, Noah looked up at her with his big, trusting eyes. He had started to speak more, his sentences growing longer, and today, as he tugged at her hand, he said clearly, "Maya, stay." Her heart swelled at the simplicity of it. No complicated words, no demands, just a child who had found something in her, someone who had always been there when he needed comfort. Maya bent down, her voice trembling with emotion as she whispered, "I'll always stay, Noah. Always." In the following weeks, Maya continued to sing her lullabies, but now each note carried more weight. They were not just soothing songs for the twins, they were affirmations of her own journey. She sang not only to calm them, but to remind herself that she had earned her place here. One evening, as Emily joined her in the nursery after the twins had drifted off to sleep, Emily looked at Maya with quiet admiration. "I've seen a change in you," she said softly. "You found a way to heal. Not just the children, but yourself." Maya smiled, the last traces of uncertainty fading from her features. "I've realized I don't need to erase my past. I can carry it with me and still create something new." Emily's smile was warm, her eyes soft with understanding. "That's exactly it. You're more than just your past, Maya. And so are the children." As the days turned to months, the mansion became quieter in a way that felt like true peace. Richard's business empire continued to thrive, but at home there was something deeper than just wealth. It was the quiet assurance that they were a family, fractured at times perhaps, but together. Maya had become a fixture in the home, not because she had been forced into a role, but because she had earned her place through her actions and her heart. Her past no longer defined her, it was her present and the love she had helped foster that spoke volumes. One evening, as she sat by the window, watching the twins play in the garden, Maya reflected on everything that had brought her here. The whispers, the doubt, the pain. But it had all led to this moment, this life, in the place she had once thought she could never belong. She no longer feared that the past would come crashing down around her. Instead, she embraced it, knowing that it was only through facing it that she could move forward. Maya had found her redemption, not through perfection, but through acceptance and through love. In the stillness of the evening, she whispered a final line from her lullaby, one she had added only recently. "In the dark we find the light." And for the first time, Maya believed it wholeheartedly. The Carter mansion stood quiet, its vast rooms filled with the echoes of laughter, and the quiet hum of life returning to normal. The twins had become more than just the children Richard and Emily had once desperately tried to fix. They were healthy, whole, and thriving. And Maya, the woman who had walked into their lives as a stranger, had become an irreplaceable part of their world. It was late one afternoon when Emily found Maya in the garden, sitting on a bench as the twins played in the distance. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the lawn. Maya's face was peaceful, her hands resting gently in her lap as she watched the children run, their laughter drifting through the warm air. "You look content," Emily said, approaching quietly, her voice soft as if not to disturb the calm. Maya smiled, a warmth in her eyes that had been absent when she first arrived. "I never thought I'd find peace like this." She paused, watching the children as they chased each other in circles. "But I think I finally have." Emily sat beside her, glancing over at the twins. "You've done more than give them peace, Maya. You've given me back my family, and you've given yourself a new beginning." Maya took a deep breath, her heart light. "I wasn't sure at first. I didn't think I deserved any of this." Her voice faltered slightly, but she steadied herself. "But I realized that maybe I don't need to be perfect to be worth something. I just need to be here." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's never about perfection, it's about showing up. And you've done that, Maya. Not just for us, but for yourself too. Maya's smile deepened, but there was still a quiet sadness in her eyes. She had carried so much shame for so long, never believing she could be more than the mistakes she had made. But in this house, in this family, she had learned to forgive herself. She had learned that it wasn't about erasing the past. It was about growing from it, using it as the foundation for a new life. As Emily stood to leave, she paused for a moment, her hand resting lightly on Maya's shoulder. "We'll be fine," she said softly. "The twins, Richard, me, we're all fine because of you." Maya's heart swelled, the weight of Emily's words settling into her like a quiet promise. She had found a place here, not just in the mansion, but in their lives. The next morning, as Maya stood by the window watching the sun rise over the manicured lawns, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her past, though painful, had led her here to this moment of peace. It had taken time and it had taken trust in herself and in the people who had come to believe in her. The children came bounding into the room, giggling as they tugged at her dress, their tiny hands reaching for her. Maya bent down to lift them, her arms strong and sure. As Noah leaned his head against her shoulder, she whispered softly, "You're my family now, and I'll always be here." In the stillness of the moment, as she held the twins close, Maya realized something profound. It wasn't just her that had healed. It was them, too. Together, they had all found something rare and precious. A love that wasn't based on perfection but on understanding, on patience, and on the quiet moments that made a family. Maya had come into their lives as a stranger, an outsider. But in the end, she was no longer just the maid or the ex-convict. She was someone who had earned her place, through her actions, her heart, and her unwavering love for the children who had become her own. As the twins giggled in her arms, Maya looked out the window once more, her heart full. "In the dark, we find the light," she whispered softly, believing it as she had never believed before. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be,